Section 8.5, Solving Proportions. In this section, we will be solving equations that contain rational expressions, which are fractions. And so we're going to follow a series of steps. The first step is to state the restrictions. The restrictions are the values that we want to the values that we don't want the denominator to be, because we do not want to divide by 0. And so if you look at example 1, 10 over x, the restriction for the first fraction is x cannot be 0. The restriction for the second fraction is that x cannot be 2. Notice if you substitute 2 minus 2 is 0, so we don't want to divide by 0 because that's undefined. So we want to find the value or values that make the denominator 0, and those are your restrictions. Step 2 is you want to find your LCD or LCM. So in this case, our LCM is x times x minus 2. And what we're going to do with the LCM is we're going to multiply both sides of the equation by the LCM, and that way we can eliminate the fractions. Make sure you multiply both sides by the same exact quantity. And so right here, if you notice, we can reduce x over x, and so we are left with just 10 times x minus 2. And for the other fraction, I can reduce x minus 2, right? And we're just left with 5x. Here's an equation with no fractions. We solve like usual. Distribute. And then we subtract 10 from both sides. Subtract 10x from both sides. Negative 20 is equal to negative 5x. Divide both sides by negative 5. X is equal to 4. As long as your answer is not the restricted value or values, then we're good. Sometimes when you solve, the answer you get will be a restricted value, in which case we say no solution. You can check your answer by substituting 4 back into the original equation, so you can always do that. Example number 2. So in this, if we look at this example, the denominator is x minus 2 for both fractions, and so we just have one restriction. The restriction is that x cannot be 2. Since the denominator is exactly the same, then the LCD is just x minus 2. So we multiply both sides by the LCD to eliminate the fractions. And when you multiply, x minus 2 is in the numerator. Okay, so carefully start with the first fraction. Notice you could reduce x minus 2, and so we're just left with 2x plus, need to distribute the 3x minus 6, and right here again reduce x minus 2, and it's just 9. Combine your like terms. Add 6 to both sides. Divide both sides by 5. X is 3. Again, 3 is not a restricted value, so 3 should be a solution, assuming our steps are correct. You can check your answer again by taking 3, substituting it back into the original equation, and checking your work. Last example, 3. So right here, again, an equation with rational expressions. Let's start by stating the restrictions. You've got x plus 4 and x minus 3, and so we do not want x to be negative 4. X is not equal to negative 4, and also x is not equal to 3. These two values make the denominator 0. We don't want that. Next, your LCD or LCM is going to be x plus 4 times x minus 3. And so what we want to do is multiply both sides of the equation by the LCD. And so I'm going to actually rewrite the problem just to make it a little neater. So we have space. Okay, so let's multiply. Looks like this. And then we just reduce. Okay, so right here, x plus 4 reduces. We're just left with 6 times x minus 3. Plus 2 times x minus 3 reduces. 2 times x plus 4. And then on this side, it's just negative 1 and then times x plus 4 times x minus 3. What we're going to do is we're going to FOIL first, and then we're going to distribute the negative 1. So let's actually FOIL here. We're going to get x squared minus 3x plus 4x minus 12. So we have FOILed and then distribute the negative 1. Distribute 6, distribute 2. 6x minus 18 plus 2x plus 8 is equal to negative 1. I want to combine my like terms. X squared plus x minus 12. Combine here. That gives me 8x. Negative 18 plus 8, that's a minus 10. Distribute negative x squared, negative x plus 12. This equation that we're left with is different because it contains x squared. And so if you're left with an equation that contains x squared, then you need to remember that we need to get a 0 on one side, and then we need to factor. See, if you remember the previous equations that we got, they just contained x. They just contained x, no x squared. So those are pretty quick to solve. If you have x squared, remember you need a 0 on one side and we need to factor. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add x squared, add x, and subtract 12. That way we get a 0 on this side. Okay, so 0 here. Add x squared, which gives me positive x squared. Then we add x, so that's plus 9x, and subtract 12, which gives us a negative 22. So here you have your trinomial. We can factor. When we factor, we should get x plus 11, x minus 2. Make sure you check your work. 11x minus 2x gives me a positive 9. Remember, set each factor equal to 0. X is negative 11, x is equal to 2. Negative 11 and 2 are not the restricted values, so we are okay. So both of these will work as your solution.